My fiancé said. Hurry, he'll be home any minute. I was already at the door, listening. I had finished my shift 2 hours earlier than expected. Most days I stayed late at the office because the projects I was managing required endless revisions, but that night things had wrapped up quicker. I remember debating whether to grab dinner or surprise Clara with takeout, but something in me wanted to see her reaction when I walked in unexpectedly. We had been together for 3 years, engaged for 6 months, and I thought she would be happy to see me home early. By the time I reached the apartment, I was carrying nothing but my laptop bag and the quiet kind of fatigue that settles in after long hours. The hallway lights flickered as usual, and I still had my keys in my hand when I reached the door. I was about to slide the key in when I froze. From inside came her voice, low but urgent. Hurry, he'll be home any minute. It felt like ice water had been poured down my spine. For a split second, I thought maybe she was on the phone, but then I heard another sound, a man's laugh. Not from a speaker, not muffled through a call. A real voice inside my apartment. The door wasn't fully latched. I pushed it open before I could second-guess myself. What I saw hit harder than any punch. Clara was on the couch, her blouse half-buttoned, hair disheveled, cheeks flushed. Standing near her was Felix, a face I recognized instantly. He was leaning against the armrest, shirt untucked, holding a glass of the whiskey I had bought last week. My coworker, my so-called friend. They both froze when they saw me. Clara's mouth opened and shut like she'd swallowed her words. Felix, on the other hand, straightened up and gave me the kind of smug half-smile that made my fists clench. The silence lasted no more than a second, but it felt stretched and bitter. Then I spoke, my voice louder than I intended. What the hell is going on in my apartment? Clara jumped to her feet, fumbling with her blouse. Jonas, wait, it's not what it looks like. Felix didn't move. He swirled the whiskey in his hand, almost daring me. Man, calm down. You're overreacting. That was enough to set me off. I stepped forward, closing the space between us. Felix was taller, but he backed up instinctively when he saw the way I was looking at him. The glass wobbled in his hand before he set it down on the coffee table. You're in my apartment, with my fiancé, and you're telling me I'm overreacting. My words came out sharp, controlled, but the anger boiling in my chest was hard to contain. Clara reached for me, but I shook her off. Jonas, please, just listen. He came over because what? I snapped. Because you couldn't wait until I was home? Because sneaking around in my living room is easier than facing me like an adult? Felix suddenly found his voice. Don't put this all on her. You're barely around. She needed someone to actually be there. The arrogance in his tone made me want to slam him into the wall. Instead, I took a step closer, forcing him back against the hallway doorframe. My pulse was hammering so loud in my ears that I almost didn't hear Clara yelling at both of us to stop. I grabbed Felix by the collar, forcing him to look me in the eye. You come into my home, drink my whiskey, touch my fiancée, and you think you can stand here and justify it? He smirked, though his voice cracked. You think she's been faithful all this time? You really don't have a clue. That broke something in me. I shoved him back so hard that he stumbled into the wall, his glass tipping and shattering on the floor. Clara screamed, darting between us as if she could stop what was coming. I wanted to throw him out, but a part of me needed answers. I glared at Clara. How long has this been going on? She shook her head frantically. It's not what you think. It was a mistake. Felix cut in, laughing bitterly. A mistake? Don't downplay it now. Tell him the truth. Weeks, maybe months. He should know how good you are at lying. Her face drained of color. She slapped him on the chest, trying to shut him up, but the damage was done. My stomach churned with the weight of his words. I turned on her. Months? Is that true? She froze, eyes darting between us. Then she made the worst move possible. She got defensive. You're never home, Jonas. You're always buried in work. Do you even realize how lonely I've been? The excuse stung, but what hit me harder was the way she said it with such venom, like I was the problem, like my effort to keep us afloat financially had driven her into his arms. Felix smirked again. She told me everything, man. How predictable you are. Down to your schedule, your meetings, your late nights. You should have seen how easy it was to time this. That was the slip. His words weren't just about an affair. They suggested planning, coordination, knowledge that went deeper than lust. My blood ran cold. I shoved him toward the door. Get out. Felix raised his hands, mock innocent. Fine, but don't expect her to stay loyal once I'm gone. Clara screamed at him to shut up, but he only grinned as he walked out into the hallway. I followed, slamming the door behind him, but not before a neighbor poked her head out of her apartment. She gave me a cautious look and whispered, "This isn't the first time he's been here, you know? Almost every week when you're gone." Her words hit like another punch. I stood there in the hallway, my chest heaving, while Felix walked away with that same smug expression. When I finally stepped back inside, Clara was on the couch, crying into her hands. Broken glass glinted on the floor, whiskey soaking into the rug. My home smelled of betrayal and liquor. I didn't sit down. I didn't comfort her. I just stood there, staring, my mind racing with the realization that this wasn't a one-time slip. This was deliberate, calculated, and deeper than I had imagined. The rage was still there, but something colder began to take its place, a determination to uncover everything. That night didn't end with reconciliation. It didn't end with forgiveness. It ended with me locking myself in the spare room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail, every clue I might have missed. And as I lay there, one thought refused to let me sleep. If Felix knew my schedule so well, what else did he know about me that he shouldn't? The confrontation at the doorway had ripped the mask off, but beneath it, I sensed something far worse than infidelity. And I was going to find out exactly what it was. The morning after the confrontation felt different from any other day of my life. The air in the apartment was heavy, still carrying the smell of spilled whiskey from the night before. Clara hadn't come to bed. She stayed in the living room, alternating between crying and muttering to herself. I hadn't slept much either, but when I did close my eyes, I saw Felix's smug grin and heard my neighbors whisper, "This isn't the first time he's been here." I walked out of the spare room just after sunrise. Clara was curled up on the couch with a blanket pulled tight around her shoulders. Her eyes were swollen, but she looked at me like she was waiting for a verdict. I didn't give her one. "Get up," I said flatly. She shifted nervously. "Jonas, please, can we just get up?" The tone in my voice must have convinced her not to argue. She stood, and I motioned toward her bag on the floor. It had been there the entire night, leaning against the arm of the couch. I pointed at it. "Empty it." Her lips parted like she wanted to protest, but she thought better of it. Slowly, she unzipped the bag and began pulling items out. Makeup pouch, wallet, a folded sweater, car keys. Then an envelope slid out, thick with cash. I snatched it before she could. Inside were 20s and 50s, stacked carelessly. At least $1,000. My stomach sank. Where did this come from? Clara's voice was quiet. "It's mine. Don't insult me. You don't carry this much cash. You barely carry $10 at a time. Try again." She bit her lip, refusing to look at me. I kept digging in the bag. At the bottom was a second phone. Not the one I bought her for her birthday. A cheaper model, but recent. When I held it up, her face drained of color. "Whose is this?" Clara reached for it, but I pulled it back. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up immediately, no lock. Notifications stacked across it, dozens of them. Texts from Felix, some from unknown numbers. Most were short, coded, but one caught my eye. "Meeting today at 4. Jonas won't suspect anything." My grip tightened on the phone. Clara stepped toward me, voice trembling. "Jonas, you're making this worse. Please stop." I turned on her, rage burning beneath the surface but sharpened now with suspicion. "Stop? You've been sneaking around with my coworker, keeping a second phone, hiding cash, and you think I should stop?" She tried again to grab the phone, but I shoved her hand away. Her tears came back, but they didn't soften me. I had seen crocodile tears before. "I want answers," I demanded. "And don't feed me any more excuses about being lonely." Her voice cracked. "It started months ago, but it wasn't supposed to go this far." "What do you mean, this far?" She looked at the floor. "Felix, he said he could help us. That he knew a way to make quick money, and that you wouldn't even have to know." I cut her off. "So now you're laundering cash with him? Or is this about robbing me blind while I'm at work?" Her silence was confirmation enough. My chest felt like it was collapsing in on itself, but the anger kept me upright. I shoved the cash and the phone back into the bag. "Get dressed. We're going for a drive." She blinked, confused. "Where?" "You'll see." Half an hour later, we pulled into the parking lot of my office. I didn't tell her where we were going until we were already there. She gripped the steering wheel tighter when she saw the building. "Jonas, please, we can't." I cut her off. "You're going to sit here until I come back. Don't move." I left her in the car and marched inside. My mind was spinning, replaying Felix's smug expression, the neighbor's whisper, and now this bag full of cash and a burner phone. Something told me this wasn't just an affair. This was coordinated. I made my way up to the IT department, where my friend Armin worked. He owed me more than one favor from covering his mistakes on projects, and I knew he could quietly check something without raising alarms. "Jonas," he greeted, looking surprised. "What are you doing here so early?" I leaned in, keeping my voice low. "I need you to check something for me. Off the record." His eyes narrowed, but he nodded. "What is it?" I handed him a piece of paper with my login ID written on it. "I need to know if anyone has been using this login after hours. And I mean anyone." Armin frowned. "That's sensitive, man. You know I could get in trouble. Please, just look." He hesitated, but after a moment, he turned to his computer. A few minutes later, he whistled softly. Well, that's strange. Your ID's been used 3 times in the last 2 weeks, outside of your normal hours. Accessing files you don't usually touch. My stomach clenched. What files? Expense reports. Vendor invoices. It looks like someone's been rerouting approvals. But here's the thing. These logins came from your credentials, but not from your device. They came from a different IP address. Looks like a hotel network. A hotel. The image of Clara slipping into that dingy motel off the highway weeks ago flashed in my mind. I dismissed it then as paranoia, but now it clicked into place. Do you know which hotel? I asked. Armin nodded. Yeah, I can trace it. I thanked him and left before anyone else arrived. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I drove back out of the parking lot. Clara was still sitting there, arms folded, staring at nothing. She looked up when I opened the door. Jonas, what were you doing in there? I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled the burner phone out of her bag and scrolled through the messages again. One stood out. Room 214. Usual time. The hotel name was attached to the message thread. The same one Armin had just mentioned. I looked at Clara, my voice cold. You've been meeting him at hotels. Using my login. Accessing company files. What exactly are you two planning? Her face twisted in fear. Jonas. I swear, I didn't want to. He said it was safe, that you'd never know. Her words trailed off when she realized how much she had given away. I started the car and pulled out of the lot. We drove in silence until we reached the hotel. It was a rundown place, the kind of building where secrets came to rot. I parked across the street and handed her the phone. Call him. Now. Tell him you're here. She shook her head, trembling. Jonas, please don't make me. Do it. With shaking fingers, she dialed Felix's number. He answered almost immediately. You're late. His voice came through the speaker. Room 214. I've been waiting. I snatched the phone from her and ended the call. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. From anticipation. I finally had a chance to confront him on my terms. We crossed the street together. Clara was pale, whispering for me to stop, to think this through, but I ignored her. The elevator creaked as we rose to the second floor. My heart pounded with every ding. At room 214, I didn't knock. I shoved the door open. Felix was inside, sitting at a small table with papers spread out before him. He looked up, shocked, then smirked when he saw me. Well, guess the secret's out. I stepped inside, slamming the door behind me. Clara hovered in the doorway, torn between us. What are you doing with my login? I demanded. Felix leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. Making better use of it than you ever did. You think this company values you? You're just a cog. But with the right approvals, the right transfers, there's money to be made. Money Clara and I were planning to enjoy. My fists clenched. So you weren't just screwing my fiancée. You were using her to rob me blind. Felix shrugged. Call it business and pleasure. Clara started sobbing, insisting she hadn't meant for it to go this far, but her voice faded behind the roar of blood in my ears. This was no longer about betrayal. This was about survival. That night at the apartment, Clara tried to explain herself again. She swore she only went along with it because Felix promised it would be harmless. She claimed she never touched the money, never opened the files herself. But I had stopped listening. The bag of cash sat on the table between us, a silent reminder that everything she said was a lie. I stared at her for a long time, then finally said the words I had been holding back. You chose him over me. You helped him set me up. Now I'll show you both what that choice costs. The look in her eyes told me she knew I meant it. And for the first time since I walked through that doorway, I felt calm. The more I thought about Felix's smug grin in that hotel room, the more a new kind of clarity began to cut through the rage. Anger was loud, blinding, but focus was sharp. I knew now this wasn't only about betrayal of the body. It was betrayal of my career, my future, everything I had worked for. If Felix succeeded, I'd be the one left holding the bag when his scheme collapsed. Clara's role was murky. Was she a pawn, an accomplice, or both? Either way, if I didn't move carefully, I'd be destroyed. I went back to Armin in IT the next day. I told him to dig deeper into the login history. He was hesitant at first, but when I showed him the burner phone and some of the messages, his eyes widened. He understood then this wasn't me being paranoid. It was a setup. He promised to pull full records and send me copies. Keep this quiet, I told him. Felix can't know you're helping me. On my way home, I stopped by an electronics store and bought 2 things, a small hidden camera and a voice recorder. If Felix and Clara thought they were playing chess, I would become the grandmaster. When I returned to the apartment, Clara was waiting at the kitchen table, eyes red, staring at the untouched bag of cash. She looked like she hadn't moved since last night. Jonas, she whispered, please talk to me. We can fix this. I set the recorder in my pocket and pretended to soften. Maybe, but you need to prove you're willing to come clean. Tell me everything. Her lips trembled. For the first time, She actually spoke with some detail. She admitted Felix had approached her months ago, flirting first, then talking about opportunities. He said he could reroute company funds into shell accounts if he had access to the right logins. Clara claimed she resisted at first, but Felix wore her down. Then came the affair, which blurred everything. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said, tears streaming. "But I was scared. He said if I told you, he'd ruin both of us." I nodded slowly, but inside I was thinking, perfect. Every word was being recorded. 2 days later, I played my role differently. I acted calmer around Clara, even affectionate in small ways. She seemed confused, but hopeful. I needed her guard down. One evening, when she left her purse on the counter, I slipped the tiny camera inside and positioned it so it pointed at the living room. The next time Felix came over, I'd have proof. I didn't have to wait long. On Thursday night, while pretending to work late at the office, I parked my car a block away and waited. Sure enough, Felix showed up at our apartment. I watched from a distance as he entered with a duffel bag. When I returned 2 hours later, the apartment was quiet. Felix was gone. Clara was in the shower. I retrieved the camera and reviewed the footage in the spare room. What I saw made my skin crawl. Felix wasn't just lounging on the couch or whispering sweet nothings. He was spreading out papers across the table, coaching Clara on how to answer questions if anyone ever asked about the finances. At one point, he said, "Jonas will take the fall. He's too loyal to suspect you." Clara laughed nervously, but she didn't protest. She leaned over the table, tracing her finger across a document, and said, "He'll never see it coming." I watched it 3 times, my jaw tight. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. She was actively complicit. I emailed the video file to myself and backed it up on a flash drive. Then I hid the camera again, just in case. The next escalation came when Armin messaged me privately. He'd found more. Not only were Felix's logins tied to hotel networks, but some of the rerouted vendor payments had already been flagged by accounting as suspicious. If I did nothing, the finger would eventually point at me, the person whose credentials had approved everything. I asked Armin to hold off reporting it formally. I needed time. He reluctantly agreed, but warned me, "Jonas, if this blows up, you're going down with him unless you've got bulletproof proof." That became my mission. On Friday night, Clara suggested we go out to dinner, like she was trying to reset things between us. I agreed. We sat at a quiet restaurant, candlelight flickering, but the air was poisoned. She smiled weakly, reached for my hand, and said, "We can start over. Nobody has to know." Her words were almost laughable. I forced a smile. "You're right. But if we start over, you need to cut him off. No more Felix. No more secrets." She hesitated, her fork clinking against her plate. "He won't let me just walk away. Then you'll help me set him up." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" I leaned in, lowering my voice. "We tell him I know nothing. You keep pretending. Get him to bring everything here. Once we have it, we're free." Clara stared at me, torn between suspicion and desperation. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but if this goes wrong..." I cut her off with a practiced calm. "It won't." 2 nights later, Felix returned. Clara had texted him earlier, saying she had convinced me she wanted to stay together, that I was too naive to suspect. It made me sick to read, but it baited the hook. I was in the spare room, door cracked just enough. The camera was rolling. The voice recorder was hidden under the couch. Felix dumped the duffel bag on the table again. This time it was full of folders, contracts, forged approvals. He started explaining how one more round of transfers would secure them enough money to disappear. Clara asked the right questions, playing her role. She said, "What if Jonas ever notices? He's not stupid." Felix smirked. "Then he'll be the perfect fall guy. By the time anyone traces it back, he'll look guilty, not us. And you'll testify that you knew nothing. They'll eat it up." Clara forced a laugh, but her eyes darted nervously. Felix didn't notice. I had everything I needed, but I wanted more. At one point, Felix pulled out my login credentials scribbled on a sticky note. My handwriting, forged perfectly. "See," he bragged. "No one will ever prove it wasn't him." That was the final nail. I stepped into the living room then, clapping slowly. Both of them jumped. Felix went pale for half a second before covering it with arrogance. "Guess the cat's out of the bag again." Clara froze, her face drained of blood. "Jonas." I held up my phone, showing the red recording light. "I've got every word." Felix tried to laugh it off. "That won't hold up. You think anyone's going to believe you over me?" I smiled coldly. "I don't need them to believe me. I just need them to see you." His jaw clenched. He started packing the papers back into the duffel bag, muttering under his breath. But I didn't stop him. I wanted him to think he still had control. As he stormed out, Clara followed, pleading with me to understand. I didn't respond. I just locked the door behind them and slid down against it, heart pounding. Now I had video, audio, documents, and a witness, Clara herself, admitting knowledge. But I wasn't ready to act just yet. I needed the timing to be perfect. Because if Felix thought he was setting me up, he hadn't seen what I was preparing for him. The following week was the hardest part, pretending. At work, I smiled like nothing was wrong. At home, I kept Clara close enough to keep her from panicking, but distant enough that she knew I wasn't fooled. She hovered constantly, torn between fear of Felix and fear of me. I could feel her unraveling. Sometimes she muttered to herself in the kitchen. Other times she sat on the balcony staring into the night. I let her. The more she cracked, the easier it would be when the truth exploded. Meanwhile, Armin sent me the final logs. Felix had already rerouted nearly $20,000. Enough to trigger suspicion, but not yet discovered by upper management. The window was closing. I had to act soon. The breaking point came one night when Clara thought I was asleep. I heard her whispering into the burner phone in the bathroom. Her words were muffled, but I caught enough. He doesn't know yet. I'll keep him distracted just a little longer. That was it. The mask dropped. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't scared of Felix. She was part of this. I waited until she returned to bed, then quietly got up, retrieved the recorder, and played back her call. It was all there, enough to bury her alongside him. And as I listened to her voice plotting in the dark, I realized something. The woman I thought I loved was gone. What remained was a stranger willing to destroy me for money. The trap was almost ready. All I had to do now was spring it. I spent the weekend stitching everything together like a prosecutor preparing for trial. The camera footage, the recordings, the screenshots of Clara's burner phone, the login logs Armin had quietly sent me. Every piece of the puzzle laid out a picture so clear that even the most skeptical person would see the truth. But raw evidence wasn't enough. I needed timing. If I played this too early, Felix might spin it, Clara might deny it, and I'd be left tangled in a mess of accusations. If I played it too late, the scheme might implode with me standing at ground zero. So I planned my move for Monday morning. I arrived at the office early, just as the accounting department was starting their week. I requested a meeting with HR and the head of finance, keeping my voice steady, even though my chest was tight with adrenaline. I told them I had urgent information about fraudulent activity. When they pulled me into a small conference room, I laid it all out. The files, the recordings, the videos. At first, they looked skeptical, especially since Felix had a reputation for being charismatic and reliable. But as the evidence piled up, especially the video of him coaching Clara about framing me, their faces hardened. The head of finance, Ms. Hargrove, leaned back, arms crossed. "Jonas, this is serious. If what you've shown us is accurate, this isn't just misconduct. It's criminal." I nodded. "I know. And I've already contacted someone outside the company as well." Their brows furrowed. "Who?" "Law enforcement." I pulled out the flash drive I prepared. It contained everything. Copies of the videos, the forged login notes, timestamps, and Clara's whispered phone call about distracting me. I explained how Felix had been rerouting funds, using my credentials to cover his tracks. I explained how Clara had been complicit, feeding him my schedule and helping him hide. By the end, there was no question left. HR excused themselves to call legal. Finance began drafting a formal report, and I walked out of that office knowing Felix's world was about to collapse. When I got home, Clara was sitting at the kitchen table again, staring at her coffee like it might offer answers. She looked up at me with hollow eyes. "Jonas, where were you?" I dropped a folder on the table. Inside were copies of the most damning pieces of evidence. Right where I needed to be. She flipped through the pages, her hands trembling. As she read, her lips parted, but no words came out. Finally, she whispered, "You wouldn't." I already did. Her face went pale. She gripped the edge of the table like the room was spinning. "Felix will kill me if he finds out I cut her off coldly. "Felix won't be in a position to kill anyone. By the time you hear from him again, it'll be from a cell block." Clara shook her head violently, tears streaming. "Jonas, please. I was stupid, I was greedy, but I didn't mean to hurt you like this. We can fix it." "Fix it?" I snapped. "You laughed about me being the fall guy. You called me predictable. You helped him forge my name. There's no fixing that." Her sobs filled the apartment, but I felt nothing. The part of me that once loved her had already died in that hotel room. The real fireworks came the next morning. Felix strutted into the office like he owned the place, oblivious to the storm waiting for him. He sat 2 rows over from me, tapping on his keyboard, humming some tune under his breath. For a moment, I wondered if he had any idea. But when HR and security walked into the room and called his name, the way his face stiffened told me he knew immediately. They escorted him out, his voice rising in protest. "This is a mistake. You can't do this." Heads turned across the office, whispers spreading like wildfire. By noon, the whole company knew. Felix was suspended pending investigation. By the end of the week, he was gone. But that wasn't the end of it. Later that day, detectives showed up at the office. They asked to speak with me privately. I handed them the flash drive and walked them through everything again. They took notes, nodding, and assured me they'd be moving quickly. When I returned home that night, Clara was pacing the apartment like a caged animal. She jumped when I walked in. "They came to see me," she blurted. "The police. Jonas, they know everything." I didn't answer. I simply walked past her, dropped my keys on the counter, and went to pack a bag. "Where are you going?" she asked, panic rising in her voice. "Somewhere you're not." Her cries followed me down the hallway, but I didn't stop. I threw clothes into a duffel, zipped it up, and walked out the door. For the first time in weeks, I breathed freely. The fallout unraveled fast. Felix, cornered and desperate, tried to spin the narrative, but the evidence was too strong. The forged notes, the IP traces, the video recordings, he couldn't explain them away. So he did what rats always do. He turned on his accomplice. When detectives pressed him, he admitted Clara had been involved. He claimed she was the one who pushed him to escalate, that she laughed about how I'd never suspect a thing. Whether that part was true or not didn't matter. He implicated her to save himself, and she became a co-conspirator in the eyes of the law. 2 weeks later, she was arrested at the apartment. Neighbors watched as she was let out in handcuffs, her face streaked with tears. I wasn't there to see it. I had already moved into a friend's spare room, but word traveled fast. I received one text from her after that. Just one. "Please, don't let them do this to me." I didn't reply. Work slowly returned to normal, though the stares lingered. People whispered about how Felix had managed to scheme under everyone's noses, about how close I had come to being destroyed. Some looked at me with pity, others with respect. I didn't care either way. All that mattered was that my name was clear. Armin pulled me aside one afternoon. "You did the right thing, man. If you hadn't caught this, it would have landed on you." I nodded. "Thanks for having my back." He shrugged. "Just promise me one thing. Don't ever let someone get that close again. Not like her." I gave a bitter smile. That lesson's already carved into me. Months later, Felix was sentenced for fraud and identity theft. Clara took a plea deal, but it still meant jail time and a ruined record. As for me, I rebuilt. It wasn't easy, but it was clean. I cut ties with everyone who had been connected to them. I moved out of the apartment, got a new place, and started fresh. Sometimes, late at night, I'd think back to that moment at the doorway, the words that shattered everything. "Hurry, he'll be home any minute." She was right. I was home any minute. Just not the minute she expected. And because of that, I heard it all. Because of that, their plan never stood a chance.